Welcome to the Legal Navigator podcast. I'm your host, Rebecca from Law Training Centre. In this episode, we have the privilege of being joined by special guest speaker, Alisa Grafton. Alisa is not only a lawyer, but an English Scrivener Notary with over 22 years of experience in the field. Notably, she's made history as the first Russian national to qualify as a Scrivener Notary Public. And beyond a distinguished notarial practice, she's also a renowned professional speaker and a networking expert, particularly within the legal sphere. Her expertise is captured in her book, Great Networking, The Art and Practice of Building Authentic Professional Relationships, which was recognized as a finalist in the esteemed Business Book Awards of 2023. Currently, Alisa served as the Notarial Practice Course Lead at UCL, and today we have the opportunity to learn more about the notarial profession and becoming a notary from Alisa herself. But before we jump into the discussion, thank you very much, Alisa, for joining us today. How are you doing?
Well, I'm doing very well, Rebecca, and even better now hearing your wonderful introduction. Thank you for that.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So, if you could just start by just sharing with our listeners today just a bit more about your background and what exactly led you to pursue a career as a notary public.
So I first came to settle in the UK in the year 2000, and I was already a qualified lawyer. I'm qualified in civil law jurisdiction. And of course, my qualification was not hugely relevant to England and Wales, so I knew that I had to requalify and go down some sort of process. So I started thinking of perhaps going down qualifying as a solicitor, or perhaps even consider qualifying as a barrister. Notaries are indeed a more obscure branch of the legal profession in England and Wales, but let's not forget that this is also the oldest branch of the legal profession, and it certainly is distinguished, and there is a lot to learn about this profession. So once I started looking into the role of notaries in the society, into what it takes to qualify, and in fact, into just how international the role is, I became quite fascinated, and that's when I decided to pursue that career.
Brilliant. So, how did you navigate the qualifications necessary to practice law? Like, could you walk us through the pathway that you took?
Of course, and before I do so, I ought to say that my route was quite different from the options that are being offered now, and of course that took place some time ago. But nonetheless, I think it probably would be, if anything, of interest to our listeners. So I joined initially a firm of Scrivener Notaries, and perhaps we can talk about Scriveners a little bit later on so that it becomes clearer. But I joined the firm of Scrivener Notaries shortly after I came to settle in the UK, and initially as an assistant in one of the departments. But then a few months down the line, I was offered a traineeship with the firm, or at the time we were called article clerk. And the part of that was, of course, training was very much on the job, but also I had to independently, I must say, study, in my case, 10 legal subjects. The course was run at the time by Cambridge University, and it was a fully distant course, in fact not fully distant, because mostly distant course, because we had to attend one or two sort of immersive residential weekends in Cambridge. But the idea was that each of the legal subjects was studied independently by the student in their own time, and then the examination took the form of essay writing. So that took, in my case, almost, I think, around 4 years to complete. As I said, I was studying independently the subjects of the legal system that were completely unfamiliar to me. In fact, if anything, I think I found it more difficult, having already qualified as a civil law lawyer. I found it quite difficult to retrain my mind to start thinking as a common law lawyer. And alongside a very intense and busy full-time work as an article clerk, as a trainee at that particular firm of Scrivener Notaries. It was, yes, they were quite tough and very busy few years. But eventually in 2005, I qualified as a general notary public. and a couple of years later qualified as a Scrivener Notary Public.
So if you could just start off and just explain to us what exactly is a Scrivener Notary and how is it different from a general notary public, and just in general, just provide history about
Sure.
the profession and the significance in the legal
Yes,
sector.
let's do that. So the profession dates back to pre-Reformation times. And in fact, the first notaries were the ones who were dispatched from Italy on the order of the Roman Pope. And to very much duplicate what these notaries were doing in continental Europe, but in this common law country. So you can see how the notarial profession in its origin, in fact, stands out from your kind of typical common law legal profession. So we do indeed have our root within the civil legal system, but we were so well incorporated into this common law system that the role of the notaries slowly but surely started to become more important. And following the Reformation, so the Archbishop of Canterbury started appointing notaries independently, but more and more notaries with time started being involved in commercial matters. So, and that was running alongside ecclesiastical matters. So it is indeed a very ancient profession, and it's probably lesser known because of the one significant reason. Notaries are almost never called upon when the matter has domestic purposes. So unlike our colleagues in the continental Europe and Latin America, so in the countries that practice civil law, we are effectively not required when documents need to be used just within our jurisdiction of England and Wales. So people who come across notaries, it usually happens because there is some sort of transaction that happens or takes place abroad, and they are then requested that the documents relating to this transaction are notarized. So this is often the first when people would come in contact with notaries. And but this is also a very important time, because this is when people start understanding what the role of a notary is. And effectively, we are making sure that the documents that are being executed in this country are being executed, yes, in accordance with the applicable laws of this country of England and Wales, or this jurisdiction of England and Wales, but that such documents can be easily used in the foreign jurisdiction where they are requested. So this is where the international aspect of our role comes in. And I suppose that kind of brings us into the role of a Scrivener Notary. Now, Scrivener Notaries have always been an independent branch within the profession. And until 1999, until the Access to Justice Act came into effect, Scrivener Notaries held the monopoly of practicing in central London, so within the square mile of the city and a few miles surrounding the city. So you can imagine that the profession held a tremendously important role within the city. And someone who is not qualified as a Scrivener Notary simply could not be working as a notary, as a general notary, within the confines that were within the monopoly of the Scriveners. But nonetheless, general notaries existed elsewhere in the country. And just going slightly ahead into into the qualification process, every notary needs to qualify first as a general notary before they qualify as a Scrivener. So Scrivener notaries, general notaries who have also passed an additional exam or a number of additional exams, as well as are members of the Worshipful Company of Scriveners. And once this takes place, they become effectively Scrivener notaries.
Brilliant. Thank you. That was a lot of information to unpack them. Very useful. I just wanted to touch on a key thing that you mentioned. You touched on the international aspects of the role of a notary. Would you say that's the key difference as to the way it, differentiates from other professions like solicitors, barristers, and silence lawyers? So essentially what I'm asking, if you could just define how the role of a notary differs from other legal professions.
So notaries first and foremost are concerned with the formalities of executing any document. And so it could be a document that is for personal use or a document that is to be executed by a company or another body corporate. Notaries usually do not provide advice on the applicable provisions or in-depth advice on law. However, we do provide advice on the applicable provisions of English law and occasionally applicable provisions of the foreign law that we are well familiar with. So, for example, this is one of the specialities of Scrivener Notaries. So notaries are different from the other two branches of the legal profession, solicitors and barristers, in that we are concerned with documents, and as we have established, we're concerned with documents that are, in the vast majority of cases, to be used abroad.
Great. So it's interesting to just hear from your perspective why someone should pursue a career as a notary. Like, for example, what are the benefits of qualifying through this pathway?
Well, I suppose it's personal to everyone. And to me, the origins of my interest lied in the fact that this is the profession that combines languages and law. So if you're good at languages and you are looking to qualify as a lawyer, but would like for a large portion of your work not just to be focused on English law, and then you would like a little bit more of international exposure, then actually being a notary would afford that. By definition, notaries are concerned with documents that could be used in literally any corner of the world. So our days are very varied. They are actually determined by the nature of the document that's provided to us. And usually it's not something that we can predict. We just have to deal with the instructions that we receive. So it really is suited to someone who is interested in that international aspect, interested in the work that perhaps is more transactional, and so on. You can feel that our day is incredibly intense because we deal with a variety of matters with different countries, and they can span obviously personal matters, corporate matters. So the majority of people who I see on my course, they're the ones who indeed are looking to qualify as notaries in order to supplement their current professional qualifications. The minority are looking to practice full-time as notaries, and they're the ones who are either with scrivener firms, who are obviously by definition full-time notaries, or they are with non-scrivener firms, but also the ones that specialize in providing notarial practice. And there are more and more of those firms now, but they are, they have they work very hard on their marketing just to ensure that it is clear that they provide notarial services exclusively. And of course, I can only speak from the perspective as a course convener of year 2 at NPC. And from my perspective, well, it is clear that this is the only academic route to qualify as a notary public. So what I can see is that people who come to me, they have long into making up their mind to qualify, but they are sort of at the very last finishing stage of doing so.
Brilliant. So what can you tell us just about the professional training aspect and what you're particularly involved in UCL?
I joined UCL in September 2023, so this is my first academic year of being the course convener at year 2. And year 2 is the last year of the Notarial Practice course currently run by UCL. So this is the academic route of qualifying as a notary public. And the students who come to my year, they would have already successfully passed their Roman law and private international law exam. Yes, so the people who would come to year 2 of NPC would have already successfully passed all of the essential law subjects that entitle them to starting NPC. So they are very much, well, nearly fully fledged professional notaries. But the course this year is very intense. And our main focus is on providing as much of practical training as possible. So our understanding is that those students who have reached that final stage of their qualification process are fully motivated to go to the end. And they are already practicing lawyers with all of the essential qualifications, but they just need that very specialized knowledge that is required to specifically to provide them with the kind of the practical abilities in order to be able to fulfill the role of a notary public. So the course is divided into 2 parts. In term 1, we cover matters relating to instructions coming from private individual clients, as well as general matters relating to our practice. So, of course, we study in depth matters relating to client identification, anti-money laundering matters, and in fact, all of the regulatory matters. The term is completed with students taking their assessment, formative assessment. In term 2, we cover matters that mostly relate to notaries' work for corporate clients. And so we look at the various aspects, starting from receiving an instruction on a corporate matter through to how to address various matters in this instruction, how to handle it, how to generally deal with the various bodies, corporate or unincorporated structures. So all of these things are looked at in great detail. And the idea is that once the students come to their term 2 assessment, they feel quite confident in accepting client instructions and at least looking at the most important aspect of it independently, as if they would be doing in real life.
Right. So thank you for providing an overview of just the practical side of things and also just shedding light on the structure. In terms of the mode of study, how is that like for the notarial practice course?
I'm really glad that you asked this question because it's probably different from what I remember to be when I studied. Well, when I undertook my studies, and of course they were very different. But the mode of studying is or suggests a lot of independent work. We, of course, anticipate that our students are, as I said, near the completion of their qualification, and of course they are fully fledged professionals and they are able to work with materials independently. But the pure volume of the materials and the intensity of the course, the intensity of the information that the course provides, does require for many hours of, or the commitment to many hours of work. I suppose it can prove somewhat challenging, especially for those students who have other responsibilities in their lives. And in fact, most of our students are working professionals. They work full time, many of them. So it does require a certain level of commitment, but it is then rewarded by this sense that they can approach an new instruction from a client with the knowledge that they have kind of done this multiple times and they sort of have that experience already. So this is sort of the kind of the overview of the expectations in terms of the time commitment. In terms of the day-to-day work, the course is delivered on an online platform run by UCL. it's divided into weekly units. So each unit is dedicated to a certain subject. And sometimes the subject can be quite wide, or sometimes it relates to a kind of a particular form of incorporation, or when it comes to term 2. So it does vary. So the volume varies week per week. But once the students have had the time to go through the specific week's course materials, they are then encouraged to answer specific scenario-related questions in their particular group. So depending on the number of students, they are divided into a number of groups, and each group is then encouraged to answer a scenario-related question and discuss the answers, or so the various issues that students come up with inside the group. And then I, as well as my colleague, who is my deputy on the course, we would then come in and guide the students through the process of looking at a particular matter, would also help us correct any mistakes in their answers, would encourage them to see or reconsider certain answers and sort of look at the, perhaps reread some materials and look at other ways of approaching a question. So it's very much hands-on approach from my colleague and from me, but we also encourage the students to undertake this with as much independence as possible and as much collaboration and cooperation with their colleagues as possible.
Great. So I believe I read that it's a 2-year practice course. Is that correct?
So the Notarial Practice course itself is indeed a 2-year course, as I said, and the first year students study Roman law in term 1 and private international law in term 2. And the second year is dedicated to the actual notarial practice.
Great.
So this is where I said we are looking at the variety of aspects of our notarial practice, from regulatory aspects to fee strategy, through to obviously substantial matters of law. And the idea is that we present the course materials in a way that would make students well set up for their independent practice. So it's very real life based course.
Great. And just for the benefit of those who are listening to this and are curious, is this something that can be studied part-time over the course of more than 2 years, or is it just strictly just for 2 years?
So the course is 2 years, and it is part-time insofar as everyone, or the vast majority of my students, from what I understand, are already doing something else professionally. So the course can, of course, be taken anywhere in the world. It's most of the teaching, as well as most of the assessments, does take place online. I really must mention also the fact that the online teaching is being heavily supplemented by tutorials, by workshops. And so these workshops are mostly done through Zoom online, but some of them take place in person. And of course, the in-person workshops, we plan them way in advance to enable our students who travel to London, to UCL, from all regions of the country, and some actually travel even from abroad, if they happen to be abroad at that particular time. And so the students are very much encouraged to attend those. But also, looking ahead, we are looking to give students as much opportunity as possible to network with each other in person, but also to ask and sort of to have as many either in person or online interactions with us as tutors, as well as between themselves.
Great, thank you. I'd just like to touch on just the career prospects and the post-qualification options available for people who take the notarial pathway. In terms of how notaries work, could you just clarify that, like, for example, are they self-employed? Are there any specific institutional firms or places where notaries can practice in general?
There are a number of options that notaries can practice. So some choose to practice within an existing legal practice, and sometimes as employed notaries, or they would be setting themselves up as self-employed notaries within a legal practice where they are also employed solicitors. Some notaries would choose to set up completely by themselves, and they would just be working independently. And from what I understand, that probably would cover the majority of notaries in this country or in this jurisdiction. Most of them practice by themselves. And so that means that the existing network, existing cooperation with their colleagues becomes even more important for them. There is, of course, the option of being a practicing notary within a separate notarial firm. And it doesn't just have to be a Scrivener notarial firm. It can be a non-Scrivener notarial firm, but this is probably less popular simply because there are not that many firms that uniquely offer notarial services, but they do exist, and most of them are located in big cities. So there is a limitation to how many employed notaries they can take. And I have heard of other options to practice as notaries. So I suppose there are more and more flexible approaches to this at the moment. And in fact, that flexibility, the quality of flexibility, is something that appears to be the most attractive to those who are looking to qualify as notary.
So, what advice would you give to someone interested in pursuing a career as a notary?
So whilst notarial profession is lesser known, it is nonetheless an incredibly important one in this jurisdiction. And in fact, even with the fast developments in artificial intelligence, we will, I believe, will keep maintaining a very strong position. And this is due to the fact that the profession in itself is very much based on the trust that our clients have in our abilities and in our professional integrity. So my advice to those who are either looking to qualify as notaries or looking or perhaps considering that as a viable option for them is to see their perhaps future career as a long game. It does take an effort to qualify as a notary public, and for a good reason. But at the same time, it is also the profession that does require constant professional development, because things have already changed for us in the last few years, and there are huge movements in modernization of what it is that we do and how we do things, and the advent of electronic execution of documents has had a profound effect on how we operate, on our daily practice, and I dare say will have tremendous effect on our professional future. So it's a great profession for someone who is dynamically minded and is prepared to constantly stay well versed in the changes that the profession is undergoing, and kind of open to the potential of the profession transforming potentially in the next few years.
So, how would you say one can thrive as a notary? Are there any membership bodies or networks for notaries that can provide support?
Yes, and I'm glad to say that the profession is extremely well supported by a number of organizations, professional organizations. So first of all, there is the Notary Society that every notary is encouraged to be a member of. This is the society, the professional body for general notaries, but of course, many Scrivener notaries, including myself, are members. And the Notary Society provides a array of courses that are necessary for our continuing professional development, but also hosts conferences and seminars and other events that not only help us to stay afloat, professionally speaking, but also encourage that essential networking and collaboration between notaries.
Mm.
So as we have established, some notaries end up working by themselves, and obviously it can feel like you might not have many colleagues to turn to. So it's very different from when, for example, you're working in a firm of solicitors where you can turn to a colleague. But because of the nature of that kind of mode of working, it's almost
Mm.
essential that a notary, especially someone who is just starting out, have that necessary network of colleagues and contacts, and that they can lean on, that they can ask questions. Mm, And this is very much being encouraged by the professional body. Scrivener notaries have their own company, their own society, sorry, of Scrivener notaries. And again, it's the professional body for Scrivener notaries. And the members are provided with an exceptional network of very high caliber professionals. Our regulator, the faculty office of the Archbishop of Canterbury, are also very proactive in organizing various events and generally offering support. And sometimes it's very individual support to notaries when they have any questions. So there is definitely a network of support, a web of support, and it is essential. So I suppose the fear of being cast away alone working by themselves should not be there for anyone who is considering to qualify, because even though you might be working by yourself, there will always be well, potentially will be colleagues to ask questions and to kind of run any doubts by.
Great. So, is there anything important that prospective notaries should be aware of before pursuing this career path?
Yes, it is the profession that potentially sees you dealing with a vast variety of documents for use potentially in different jurisdictions daily, and perhaps even a number of different jurisdictions daily. So it would fit a dynamic individual who is prepared to learn. As someone who has been practicing for nearly 2 decades, I can say with a hand on my heart that I regularly come across a matter or scenario where that I have not previously come across. And this does keep you on your toes. So you have to be willing to learn, and you have
Mm.
to be willing to stay current and to embrace the changes that the profession is undergoing. I have mentioned the changes that the profession has been through with the rise in electronically signed documents,
Mm.
with the advent of electronic apostilles, and it has taken some of the members of the profession, almost by surprise, because they weren't really sure how to adapt and adopt to those changes and adopt those changes. But adapting is crucial. So it may be the oldest branch of the legal profession, but it's certainly the one that probably will see most changes to its MO in the next few years. And for anyone who is looking to qualify as a notary public, it's well worth being aware that a certain flexibility, intellectual, obviously willingness to learn would come in really handy as well.
Great. And from your experience, if you could just share what are the rewarding aspects of becoming a notary?
So the
Mm.
profession is very rewarding, and the rewards are mostly to do with the fact that it has such an international quality. Through being a notary, I have traveled far and wide. I have been involved in very interesting cases. I have met fascinating people, professionals in their area. I especially enjoy the variety of matters that come before us. I very much enjoy dealing with the individual matters, but even so, more so with corporate matters, because they involve complex transactions that are often followed with the documents being used in the variety of countries around the world. And of
Mm.
course, that international aspect and that exposure to foreign jurisdictions, that exposure to dealing with foreign lawyers and also understanding the requirements from foreign countries, it adds to the complexity, but it also very much adds to the interest of our profession.
Wonderful. And it's good that you touched on just before, just the way the profession is evolving due to technology. So it would be good to just end it here if we can just hear lastly from you what your thoughts are on just the future of the notary profession as a whole, and where do you see it heading towards in the coming years?
It's an interesting question because it's a little bit like looking into the crystal ball. We really do not know, truly, we do not know what effect the rise of technology is going to have generally in the legal profession. And there are all sorts of different predictions there, from stating that the profession will just completely die out and we will be all replaced by robots, to actually some people believing that the effect will be minimal, because our role, especially the role of notaries, is so much based on the kind of trust in the professional integrity of your notary, of the person himself or herself. And I think that there will be changes, and I think that there will be changes. Probably the biggest change in the way that we work will have something to do with the way we see clients, with the way documents are being executed, and also with the way that documents are accepted by countries around the world. So if documents in the paper form and the sort of conventionally signed documents and weddings are going to be becoming obsolete, it will markedly affect the way we offer services to our clients. And we will have to rethink the way that the documents are notarially certified. We will have to rely more and more on the use of technology. More and more documents would be electronically, and in turn it would mean that notaries would be investing significantly into setting up the necessary platforms that allow for these safe and seamless exchange of documents. And I think this is likely to be the most challenging aspect, because not every notary, especially notaries who work by themselves, who do not have a significant amount of resources, will be well set up to undergo seamlessly those changes in their MO. And also perhaps they would not have the necessary training to work with technology. So I think that this is perhaps where the biggest challenge lies. Yes.
Thank you so much, Alisa. That was a lot of useful information. I really appreciate our discussion today. Thank you all for listening to the Legal Navigator podcast. If you have any questions, please feel free to send an email to info@ltckent.co.uk, or for more information, please visit our website at ltckent.co.uk.